Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Tom Kurian, and welcome to our third annual United in Sustainability Credit Union Summit. I'm Tom Kurian. I'm a program manager here at United Nations Federal Credit Union. I lead our industry team. We're thrilled to have credit unions here from who have registered to attend from Vancouver, from San Juan, and really everywhere in between, right? The amount of engagement on this topic has been really exciting for UNFCU over the last few years. I really want to start by taking a moment to thank the Organization of American States, UIS FCU, for their collaboration and co-hosting this event. We're going to be connecting with Carlos Calderon, UIS FCU's CEO and president, from Washington, D.C. a little later in our program. As you can imagine, this year our initial intention was to have this event in Washington, D.C., a little bit of a change of scenery from the UN, where we've held the summit the previous 2 years. But with the situation, we went virtual. And again, just to remind everyone, we did go with the meeting format, so everyone can participate in breakout rooms. And we do want to make sure that we still have that same level of engagement that we had when we were in person. Over the next 2 days, we'll continue the momentum from those past events. In those previous summits, we still had the backdrop of climate action, but there's been a lot that's happened in the last 2 years, COVID, social justice movements. We think this summit and the momentum we've been building is more than timely. We really believe that sustainability is in the DNA of credit unions and really is a competitive differentiator for us. In those previous summits, we did exchange topics ranging from facilities management to procurement, staff engagement, and diversity. Just a few of those areas, and we're going to build on some of that and take us in some new directions this year. As you can see, we have a larger attendee group because we are virtual this year, and we do again ask that you guys. We went in the meeting format, not in the webinar format, because we do want you guys to continue discussion and continue the interaction. Again, one last thing, please do keep your mics on mute. As we get started. Also, I should mention, we do have a hashtag. If you're going to encourage people to let them know about this movement, go ahead and use hashtag UIS Summit 2020, ! That way we can follow each other on social media. And as those participants who join the UIS network will definitely be, exchanging contact information so we can stay in contact and keep connected, because really we believe it is that collaboration and connection that makes both this summit and the credit union industry really unique. And it's really how we amplify and grow our impact. So now I have the pleasure to introduce Pamela Agnone, co-executive sponsor of UNFCU's Global Sustainability Program. Pam is also the executive vice president of UNFCU and the founder in 2008 of our original Green Team. She'll really set the course and tone for this summit. So I'm welcome to introduce Pam. Pam, take it away.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Tom. It's exciting to reconvene for the third annual United in Sustainability Summit today. With the support of our expert speakers, the team at UNFCU and UIS Federal Credit Union's commitment to the cause, and everyone's enthusiasm, I'm certain that all the participants will come away from this summit with increased clarity about making sustainability actionable in your organization. We really appreciate you taking the time to continue a critical dialogue, especially during these uncertain times. Despite, or perhaps because of the pandemic, industry collaboration on environmental and social issues is now more important than ever. We know from our cooperative principles that we as credit unions already have sustainability embedded in our organizational DNA. And the summit underlines a call to action, and that is, how can we collectively address some of the most pressing issues of our day and take on a leadership role across all financial institutions when it comes to sustainability? We will today and tomorrow explore why doing what is right on environmental and social issues can positively impact organizational growth, performance, and community engagement. Our inspirational speakers and panels will share their views and their perspectives. We'll all take something away from these discussions. I did want to share a quick update on UNFCU's Global Sustainability Program. We're just weeks away from the end of our first 5-year sustainability plan. We achieved 7 out of 8 goals in 2019, and chief among these was to maintain climate neutrality even as our membership saw strong growth over the period. In 2020, we launched a supplier code of conduct that we expect our suppliers to follow, and we're happy to share all of this information with you. During strategy sessions with all of our key stakeholders this past spring, we set our next 5-year targets with 12 goals that align with 9 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. As most of you know, the Sustainable Development Goals, also known as SDGs, seek to transform the world by 2030. Among the SDGs are promoting affordable and clean energy, economic growth and equality, and tackling climate change, of course. You'll learn more about the SDGs shortly. Also, based on the United in Sustainability Network's feedback, during the course of our program, we can look forward to learning about sustainable investments and bringing innovative green products to market, as well as tips and strategies on starting out on your own sustainability journey. Credit unions' inspirational stories on sustainability give us reason to hope for a better future for the planet and a better, more equitable world. In this spirit, it's my honor to introduce today's keynote speaker, Dr. Taylor C. Nelms, the Senior Director of Research at the Filene Research Institute. Filene, as many of you know, is an independent, nonprofit think tank in Madison, Wisconsin. An anthropologist and ethnographer, Taylor has more than 10 years of experience studying consumer and cooperative finance around the world. At Filene, Taylor manages a group of researchers and a portfolio of partnerships with leading scholars. Together, they pursue cutting-edge, actionable research that explores the past, present, and future of money, technology, and people's changing financial lives. Before joining Filene, Taylor worked as a postdoctoral researcher at the University of California, Irvine, where he also received his PhD in anthropology. Taylor also holds degrees from the University of Cambridge and Ohio State University. Taylor is now going to brief us on how diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, contributes to organizational effectiveness and influences motivation. Taylor, I turn it over to you now. Thank you, and everyone enjoy the program.
Pamela, thank you so much. I am really excited and honored to be here. Thank you to UNFCU and OASFCU for inviting me. Thanks to Liz, Sylvia, Said, and all those behind the scenes or behind the computer screens, as it were, making this event happen. As Pamela said, my name is Taylor Nelms. I'm the Senior Director of Research at the Filene Research Institute. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion in credit unions. And just FYI, I will be monitoring the chat. So please do ask me questions and I'll reserve time at the end to engage with all of you or answer as best I can along the way. So just want to make sure that everyone can see my slides. How does that look? All good? All right, I'm seeing a few shaking heads, which is great. So let's move forward. Before jumping into DEI, I actually wanted to spend one moment and touch briefly on those United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. As Pamela mentioned, these goals give us a picture of the good life, right? A world of abundance, without need, without hunger, with clean water and clean energy, with good work, education, leisure, a vibrant natural world, of course, and a vibrant civic life. And I think it's important to note that it is striking that in assessing our progress toward any one of these goals, things look very different depending on who you are and where you stand in the world. Poverty and work, food insecurity, healthcare, education, clean water and energy, transportation, democracy itself are all shaped by profound inequities, exclusions, and disparities that fall along lines of race, ethnicity, gender, income and wealth, ability, sexual orientation, religion, and many other visible and invisible forms of diversity. In other words, diversity, equity, and inclusion, while not synonymous with these goals, is central to helping us achieve many of the sustainability development goals that we've set for ourselves. So tackling SDGs, I would say, requires that we also put diversity, equity, and inclusion, and especially equity, as I'll talk about in just a second, forefront. Similarly, the changing landscape of the cooperative finance industry offers new opportunities for credit unions to meet their social mission and grow sustainably. But credit unions are also challenged by inequalities as many seek to leverage new approaches to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So to that end, the Filene Research Institute is very proud to have launched, in partnership with UNFCU and many other credit unions around the United States, a new research center committed to doing cutting-edge research on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and led by a leading academic in the area, Dr. Quinetta Robertson from Michigan State University. Quinetta sends her regrets that she cannot be here herself with you. She's actually at another conference. So very unfortunately, you're gonna have to deal with me instead. So I apologize in advance. Our goal with this research center is to explore diversity, equity, and inclusion practices and policies inside of credit unions, and to understand how credit unions can leverage DEI practices to reach and serve their members. So we're asking questions like, what do credit union DEI policies and practice procedures, organizational goals, and leadership commitments look like today? How are the components of DEI related, and what are the barriers to advancing DEI and a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable financial services workforce and credit union system more generally? And then what are the impacts on business performance, of course, but also talent, culture, innovation, and especially social mission? What impacts does DEI have on credit unions and on the communities that credit unions serve? And how and when do organizations realize those impacts? And as with everything that Filene does, although we are first and foremost a research institute, we are committed to taking that research from theory to practice. And just one example, I would encourage you all to go and check out the event we just held in September to launch this new research center. And there's a wealth of resources there, some of which I'll be sharing with you today. So why DEI? There is a business case for credit unions and other organizations to embrace wholeheartedly the most progressive forms of diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. And you can see some of those reasons here on the left-hand side of the slide. But what I want to really focus on today, and I think the broader set of crises that confront us as individuals, us as leaders, and our organizations, I think really behoove us to think contextually about DEI and about sustainability. We know that an integrated approach to DEI can help strengthen credit unions as workplaces as well as service providers. We know that DEI can help increase staff and credit union member well-being, that it can help contribute to more robust communities, that it can help credit unions as a lens to help respond to urgent social demands, that it can help confront the profound inequality revealed and exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, and that it aligns, although again, it is certainly not synonymous with the broader social justice movements and civil rights movements that we've seen become front and center, right, of the way that we are operating in the world over the last 6 months, although certainly pre-exist that time. And then finally, of course, we know that DEI can help advance our cooperative principles, and may itself probably should constitute one of those cooperative principles, as a former head of CUNA, president of CUNA Board of Directors, Marie Smith, has indicated. But, and this is something that I really want to emphasize, so I put it in bold, diversity, right, just by itself is not enough. And I would also add that inclusion is not enough. So let me say that again. Diversity by itself is not enough. This is from a recent Harvard Business Review article, but it's work that Dr. Robertson and many of her colleagues in academia have been pursuing for a long time. We know that simply increasing the numbers of traditionally underrepresented people in a workplace or a workforce does not automatically produce business benefits, and it does not automatically lead to the social benefits we would like to see from a diversity, equity, and inclusion first approach. So that add, diversity, and stir approach, as these authors indicate, while that might help on the social impact statement that organizations put out, as long as business continues as usual, it will not by itself spur leaps in effectiveness or financial performance. What matters, and I think that this is really critical, is how we harness that diversity and whether we're willing to reorganize our organizations to take advantage of a diverse, inclusive and equitable workforce. So let me back up a little bit and talk just very briefly about what do we mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I don't have a ton of time today, and so I erred on the side of lots of information on these slides. And my understanding is that these slides will be made available to all of you afterwards. So I would encourage you to revisit them and dig in. And I'll link to some of additional resources from Filene and elsewhere that I hope will be helpful. But the way that we're approaching diversity, equity, and inclusion at Filene and in the research that we're doing is, obviously we take a broad approach to understanding diversity. Diversity refers to differences between people, and that they can take visible or less visible forms. Certainly they can be job related or not job related. And I would just simply emphasize here that some forms of diversity are more charged, more contentious, and more important for us to pay attention to because they refer not only to difference, right, but to unequal difference, right? Inequality as a result of historical choices and conditions. What do we mean by equity, right? Equity refers to the fairness of organizational outcomes and the allocation of resources, right? We can evaluate the equity, the fairness of organizational outcomes and allocation of resources according to a bunch of different standards, right? So there's no one way to evaluate the equitable distribution of resources or organizational outcomes. Equality standards, need principles, I think, are all in the conversation. And we're interested in exploring with credit unions ways that they can leverage some of these different approaches to understanding equity in their own workplaces and in the ways that they reach their members. What do we mean by inclusion? Inclusion to us means belonging. It means having a sense of being accepted, of being treated as a part of a community. But of course, inclusion is not by itself a positive thing, right? So inclusion, just simply belonging, can mean belonging, but at the bottom, right, of a power hierarchy. So I think it's important that we treat inclusion obviously inflected by diversity and by equity. I also think it's important for credit unions to recognize that when we talk about inclusion, we're often talking about we're thinking about two different things. We're talking about workplace inclusion on the one hand, and we're talking about financial inclusion on the other. Both of those are critical to the credit union social mission, and they're critical to the ways that credit unions do business and grow their business. And too often, I think that we talk about these things, not necessarily identifying which one we're talking about, and often without connecting the two, right? Because we know that there are really important ways that workplace inclusion and financial inclusion can influence one another. So as I said, it's not simply enough to have diversity, and there's a lot of reasons for this, and I'm not going to necessarily get into the details here. But I would just encourage us as we think through diversity, equity, and inclusion in the context of sustainability today, that we really push past the idea of simple representation, that we move into debates and conversations about inclusiveness and about equity and equality and inequality, right? We want to think about the power, who has the power to set the agenda, to influence what and how what work is done, to have one's needs and interests taken into account, and have one's contributions recognized and rewarded to further those opportunities for contribution and advancement. So even though we know that individuals, teams, and organizations can benefit from diversity, what matters is the conditions and context in which that diversity, occurs, right? And that means inclusive environments, and it also means equitable environments. So let me talk very briefly about some of the future directions that we're taking here at Filene. So first, we know that there's a great potential within credit unions to leverage diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. This is some very basic information, representational information from our colleagues over at CUNA, in particular, Dr. Samira Salem, who's been leading their efforts to try to get a better sense of, where does the credit union industry stand itself and vis-a-vis other domains and other industries. We know that there's a great deal of work to do on the board front. And while we've seen some positive results in terms of gender representation among credit union leaderships, we also know that there's a great deal of work to do there as well, since there's a clear correlation between having a female CEO and the size of your credit union. So as credit union size, asset sizes decrease, the likelihood of having a female CEO increases, but that means that female CEOs are underrepresented at larger institutions. What are the ways that DEI, kind of done right, with a kind of integrated and holistic approach, what are the ways that DEI can enhance functioning and performance in credit unions? We know that a diverse workforce can help drive market growth by helping credit unions meet a changing demographic, a more diverse community. We also know that it can help enhance member experience because workforces that feel included and empowered through psychologically safe environments can help them better serve your members. We also know that DEI done right can improve strategic performance, promote mutual learning, optimize and apply intellectual and relational capital. And we know that it can help facilitate equal opportunity at all levels of your organization, from the C-suite down to the front line. So when I say DEI done right, what do I mean? And again, this should and shall take years. And we often talk about DEI journeys and roadmaps and pathways. And I think what's important to remember there is that while there might be a beginning, there is no real end to this work. And that once you get started, this is the work that we do day in and day out as a part of the daily work that we're involved in. But Filene is really committed through this work to supporting credit unions and other organizations in the financial services world to activating diversity, equity, and inclusion in their organizations. And so we're producing a series of roadmaps to help you and your staff tackle DEI at the personal level, at the operational level, and at the organizational level. So you can find the first of these, the kind of overarching roadmap, at the link available there on the screen, and you'll have these slides to follow up afterwards as well. But let me just sort of mention, a few considerations as I finish up and transition then to hopefully have a little bit of a conversation with you, albeit virtually. I think that there are 5 key considerations for credit unions and other organizations as they seek to kind of advance DEI within their organization. So first, I think it's important to build trust, right? Psychologically safe workplaces where people feel safe expressing themselves freely. I think it's important to be active and proactive in fighting discrimination. So that means taking concrete measures to combat inequality in the workplace whenever it appears. And that requires, I think, both individual and collective learning and practice. I think it's important to embrace other ways of working, to be humble enough to recognize that we don't always see inequality when it manifests, that we don't always see discrimination when it manifests. And so actively being open to different styles, voices, behaviors can help when organizational norms perhaps implicitly discourage or silence people from particular backgrounds. I think it's really critical to make diversity a resource for learning. So I'll give you one example. One recent piece of research, study of 400 retail bank branches in the northeastern part of the United States, found that the more racially diverse the bank branch, the better its financial performance, but only for those branches in which all of the employees across racial and ethnic groups experience the environment as conducive to learning. So some of that learning was cross-cultural, but a lot of it was really technical and quite mundane, right? So in those cases, the benefit from diversity seemed to stem mainly from the process of learning itself, of collective learning itself, right? A process, of course, that involves risk-taking and being unafraid to say, I don't know, or I made a mistake, or I need help. Most importantly, I think we have to emphasize that we don't want to get trapped by the business case. Yes, there is a business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I think that it is important that we set ourselves up for success, right? And to recognize that the business case is by no means the limits of motivation for embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion in your personal life, at the operational level, at the organizational level, and certainly at a systemic level for credit unions, right? So let me end by just kind of reading a little bit of a quote from that study from the Harvard Business Review that I cited at the beginning. The authors there, they end by asking this question, and I think it's a very provocative one, so I'll end with it as well. They say, quote, "Why should anyone need an economic rationale for affirming the agency and dignity of any group of human beings, right? We should make the necessary investment because doing so honors our own and others' humanity and gives our lives meaning. If a company profits come at the price of our humanity, then they're costing us too much." So yes, there is a business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and there is also a moral imperative, one that I think overlaps and does not undermine the business case. So I'll end there. I'd love to open it up for questions. Let me thank all of the contributors to the research that Filene is undertaking, especially UNFCU. I'm really excited to be able to start this conversation with you, and I hope that I'll be able to continue it with you as well. So it looks like we do have a couple of questions, and I'll just kind of moderate this chat myself for the next kind of couple of minutes. Pamela is asking about organizational design and best practices to ensure that DEI can flourish. I actually, this is something that I've learned from Quinetta and many of the other researchers that Filene engages with. I actually, I have a little bit of a negative knee-jerk reaction to the term best practices because that assumes, right, that the playbook is the same for everyone, when we know that there's quite a bit of diversity among organizations and, of course, even within organizations. So I don't think that there is any one organizational design that is best for advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I do think that there's a lot that we can learn about the ways that organizations can be set up to produce, support belonging and to produce, psychologically safe workplaces, right? So I'll give you one example. For a long time, organizations were kind of all in on the open office plan, right? And I think the conventional wisdom has kind of shifted there a little bit, and probably for good reason, because as we found out, while we would like an open office plan to erase hierarchies, what it really did was it just kind of made them invisible, right? So I think that one of the lessons there is that we have to be really explicit about recognizing when there are power dynamics in the workplace. That's not always a bad thing, right? We do have managers. And so to manage those power differences explicitly rather than try to erase them or make them invisible. Let's see. Monica, great question. What's the number one thing that credit unions can do now under current circumstances that can help them be part of the resilient recovery? The one thing, I'll go out on a limb here, and this is a little bit to one side, but I don't think it's disconnected from this topic around diversity, equity, and inclusion. The one thing that I would encourage credit unions to do is to look at their the resources that they're committing to community social impact and community development. We've recently done a little bit of work looking at the current state of credit union philanthropic giving, for example. And we think that there's a lot of room for credit unions to grow what they do just in terms of their community partnerships and supporting community organizations while not sacrificing their balance sheet. We think that credit unions as a system could commit up to 10% of their annual earnings to philanthropic giving to community organizations and still grow as organizations and as a system. So if I would say, if there's one thing that you could do, make an explicit commitment with resources behind it to support organizations that further diverse, equitable, and inclusive communities. I think that I'm just about out of time. I do have a really kind of very specific kind of question, which is from Susan about, how do I feel about starting the DEI journey with internal resources in place versus hiring an outside consultant? And I would say, both are totally legitimate. I would say either way, what you do has to have teeth, right? So we know, for example, that one of the most important things in terms of predicting the success of a DEI program is leadership commitment and resource allocation, right? So if you're going to do it, whether you're hiring an outside consultant, and there are many who are very good, or bringing someone in to be your internal champion, there has to be momentum and resources behind it. And I would say probably the best approach for most organizations, although I wouldn't want to go out on a limb and generalize for everyone, but for the most organizations, a hybrid approach might be the best way forward, right? So you need an internal champion, right, with resources attached to the work that they do. But there's a lot of outside external expertise, both within the credit union system and outside of it that can be leveraged. I'm happy to follow up with any of you individually. Please, feel free to look me up and shoot me an email. And again, thank you so much to UNFCU and OASFCU for having me here for the United in Sustainability Credit Union Summit. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Taylor. That was a great presentation. Lots of interaction from the chat and great questions. I will interrupt for 1 second. We had a great yesterday, Inclusive also had a fantastic summit where I'm so happy to hear you talk about financial inclusion as well, not just sort of the internal, looking at sort of internal organizational structures, but actually thinking about that and the importance of that, especially in the credit union industry, which certainly has a strong focus on financial inclusion amongst our field of membership. Oh, so great. Thank you again. As we mentioned, we're definitely going to be connecting all the presenters. We'll definitely have all their content available and try to create this network, help people navigate how they deal with some of these challenges and all the great ideas here. Next, though, I think we have a really great panel session, and it's something I'm very excited about. I should mention that we do have a poll feature in our, one of the great benefits of using Zoom is we have a great poll. We ask that you all interact with the polls. But our next session is actually going to be a panel discussion. It's going to be our UN community panel on greening your facilities and some lessons learned with our moderator, led by Monica Kumar of the World Bank. Monica Kumar is our sustainability coordinator at the World Bank and with their World Bank Corporate Responsibility Program in Washington, D.C. Monica worked with every aspect of establishing and implementing a sustainability program, from building the carbon inventory to establishing an accountability system, really important when you're trying to tackling these type of operational considerations. More recently, Monica has led the development and strategic plan for the institution to establish governance body co-chaired by 2 managing directors to hold the program and institution to its targets. Over the past decade, she has led the bank's sustainability reporting, deliverables, and positioning World Bank as a sustainable investment opportunity. Monica earned her master's degree in environmental management at the Yale School Environment, and she worked as project collaborator with the Holcim Cement in Zurich and a sustainability strategist in New York City before joining the bank. And again, please everyone welcome Monica and her panel. And again, please pose any questions to the panel in our chat. Let's keep that active and lively, please. So, Monica, welcome.
Thank you, Tom. And I am very excited for today's panel. And thank you, Liz, for entrusting me for moderating this conversation. I am honored to be amongst that sustainability superstars with me. And my aim is to make today's conversation shine a light on where we are and where we're going. Because as we're living through these unprecedented times, it's not only the pandemic, which is going to have these lasting economic impacts, but also 2 underlying crises that we're going through, the climate change crisis, as well as the biodiversity crisis. And these other two crises will not be solved with just a vaccine. This means that we need to look beyond recovery to build a world that can support well-being of current and future generations. One where we are, a world where we are living within the planetary boundaries. And the practices that got us in this mess are not the ones that are going to help us get out. So with today's panel, we hope that we can provide some insights into efforts that are already in play in our organizations, and also give you an indication of our hopes for how we want to rebuild, how we want to come back better, and how we envision the sustainable world that we're trying to work towards. So with that, before we get started, we do want to understand where you are on your sustainability journey. So there is going to be a quick poll for you. The first question for you is, do you have a sustainability program? And while you're answering that poll question, Evelyn, we're going to start with you. So just get ready. We're going to give everyone about 10 seconds to answer the question. I also want to encourage everyone to continue to put questions and comments in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that. We hope that you are participating in the poll. So if we have the results of the poll, there we go. Okay, great. So a vast majority of you online today have a sustainability program already. So that gives us a good indication of how to steer our conversation. So with that, Evelyn, if I can hand to you, if you can tell a little bit about yourself, your organization, and the sustainability journey you've been on, but also highlight just one or two of your key projects that you think would be useful in this conversation. So Evelyn, off to you.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you all for having me here today. I am Evelyn Nash, and I am the Environmental Sustainability Officer at the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C. So my job has been to, first of all, help to develop the program that we have in sustainability and to keep it running over the past 10 years as long as I've been at IMF. So our journey started on a very grassroots effort. It started on not a corporate mandate, but essentially a couple of people in our facilities department that became very interested in sustainability, and thus they began to move it forward. What we did is we established a framework of following the LEED guidelines for our buildings. So we looked at our buildings first and conducted a gap analysis as to how we could comply, not necessarily certify, but comply with LEED certification guidelines. So with that gap analysis, we were able to see what we were missing, what we could be doing, and what we already had in place. And it was quite surprising. A lot of what we had in place were things that we weren't familiar with. For instance, our facilities vendor had things already taken care of in terms of the Energy Star. We had things being done, like green cleaning was already starting at the time. It was a number of things that we noticed were already happening. And of course, a lot of things that were missing. So through this effort of following LEED as a sustainability framework, we were able to get our buildings LEED certified in 2009. And we certified it gold at the time and have been continuously following the recertification process for our buildings. So with that recertification process comes managing of data yearly to ensure that we are capturing what is needed at the end of the 5-year cycle. And that 5-year cycle entails providing most of that data over to the U.S. Green Building Council to once again recertify. And the data is all involved in regards to energy, waste, water, indoor environmental quality, some innovation, which we included. We have a habitat not too far from here that we have revitalized and turned into a butterfly garden. And there are some other things that we've done innovatively to assist with our certification. We also have a facility that we own, which is a long-term stay facility. And so, well, short-term stay facility, but it could be used for long-term as well. That during the construction, we use LEED as a guideline to get that certified as well. So the recertification process for our headquarters has been ongoing. So we started at gold and eventually led our way to get 2 platinum certifications over the past 10 years. So gold went to platinum. Now the goal after this is to ensure that we can get platinum for all our facilities. So all our facilities that we own and manage would be the 2 headquartered facilities. We own the long-term stay facility, short-term long-term stay facility, in addition to getting different certifications that are platinum. So we want to be platinum all around, which really helps us. And in terms of looking at the crisis that is going on right now, LEED has actually offered a framework for addressing some of that crisis. And we're piloting right now a project so that we can get certified under this LEED crisis process. And it's still the same as LEED, but it's looking at things a little bit closer to address the COVID crisis. So it's a journey we've taken, and it's been a fun journey. It's been a very interesting journey. And I see that some of you have actually established your sustainability programs. You may have things already that may comply with LEED. You don't have to always follow LEED. There are other certification to follow, but I wish you well on your certification path. Back to you, Monica.
Thanks, Evelyn. And I should mention, Evelyn, when the IMF started getting their LEED certification, it created a benchmark for the rest of us in the neighborhood who looked at them with jealousy going, oh my God, how do we catch up? So LEED has definitely been one of the leading green building standards out there, and there are multiple other ones. The other thing to mention is Evelyn's a great person to talk to if you want to talk about refurbishing your buildings, especially with asbestos. So, but obviously you have to buy her a lot of drinks before you talk about that. Okay, so our next panel speaker is Susan with National Geographic. And Susan, again, another superstar in this landscape, can tell a lot about how Nat Geo has come about. And again, a lot of things I learned from her every single day. So Susan, can you come on and give us a little bit of background about yourself and your sustainability journey?
It's so funny because I think of all the things that I've learned from you, Monica, because she was on this journey before I was in it professionally. And we have a group that gets together, and she was one of my therapists saying, no, don't do that. It's not worth it. Try that. Yes. So I've been with National Geographic for 20 years now, and I kind of illustrate exactly how the program that we have built up. And as Evelyn talked about, you really have to first look at what you have. And those of you who mark that you don't have a program, if you're not the sustainability person at your place, you might be surprised to find out that some things are already happening. And so if you're interested in having a sustainability program, something a little more formal, a little more organized, that has goals, ask the questions. What are we doing? What are our facilities doing? Talk to the people who pick out your trash and ask them what happens to it. Talk to the people who manage your energy. Talk to the people who manage food if you've got it. What happened at Geographic was we started with LEED as well. It was the program was just beginning, and we had folks on staff who said, we want to be the first. And we were the first existing buildings, not a new construction, but 100-year-old buildings that said, let's do LEED certification. And that taught us some things. But then it was staff, regular staff from all different parts of the organization who said, we report on climate change and we report on the trash and the pollution that is out there. What are we doing about these issues in our own house, in the work that we do? And it was regular staff who kept pushing until officials or executives up on high made that volunteer effort actually official. And with that stamp of approval from the leadership commitment, just like in the DEI, we were then able to start asking more questions about, have we tried this? Can we do this? What else is important? And seeing what we could and should do and making formal goals that we could work towards. And then over the years, we always invited staff to participate and teach us what else we might try, because they knew best where the waste was, where there were processes that didn't need to be going on, and where, you know, some people paid attention to the rules and some didn't. And so they were the best information we could get of what needed to change. And we began to put policies in place, and we included in this group of volunteers people who had the ability to sign the check and make things real. So when the green team said, hey, we have a lot of people commuting and they would commute in better ways if they had a little supplement, the head of HR was part of our group, and he didn't turn around to HR and say, go figure this out for me. He turned to that green team member who'd said, couldn't we have a transit subsidy, and said, tell me what it looks like. And so regular staff got involved with figuring out the logistics and how much it might cost and what it would take. And then that head of HR said, this looks good, and then handed to his team and made it real. And that gave ownership to the staff, as well as giving new information and a little extra labor, as it were, volunteer labor, to the folks who actually made things happen. And I have found for our program, that was the strongest thing we could have done, was involving staff, because no one person is going to solve all the issues of an organization, and no one organization is going to solve this problem. We need to educate and engage everyone. And what we teach our staff in our facilities now, they then can take home. And especially right now, where so many people are working for you, but not in your office, helping them know how to save energy and save money and feel better about the space they're working in that you no longer control is only to your benefit as well as theirs and the planet's.
Excellent, Susan. That seems quite like a grassroots journey that you've created. One other thing I should mention about Susan is Nat Geo now has a nonprofit side as well as a private sector side. So whenever we have conversations, it's quite interesting for us, because we have to talk about both. How do you make the financial argument, but also the mission-driven argument that Nat Geo needs to create? So we'll come back to that. Let's move on to our next panelist, which is Neves with UNOPS. And Neves, if you can come on and tell a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the journey within UNOPS and some of the key projects you want to highlight.
Yeah, thank you, Monica, and hello to everybody. So yeah, my name is Neves Costa, and I work for UNOPS, which is a member of the United Nations family. And for those who don't know us, we are a very decentralized organization that operates in more than 100 countries. Most of them, many of them, are in post-conflict situation, in very challenging environments, while our headquarters is in Copenhagen, Denmark. And I've been with UNOPS for more than 10 years now, and always working in sustainability, first in procurement, and now with our environmental management. And well, perhaps like the type of things we do might be a little bit different, because we have such a heavy presence in the field. But I hope that some of what I'm going to share with you is going to have some takeaway, something that can inspire people. So one of the things I wanted to, the stories, let's say, I wanted to share with you is how we got our ISO 14001 environmental management system certification. And it's a combination of different factors, I would say. One thing that we had when we decided to go for this certification was a very supportive executive director that just told us, like, go for it, get us certified. So, engagement from the top is important. And so we designed the management system and we rolled it out, and then we started to certify some countries. And we picked, actually, for our certification, one of the first countries that we certified, not the first one, but one of the first, was actually was Afghanistan. We went to 35, our operation in Kabul, because it was quite big and we had control on the facilities. We actually have an office and then we have accommodation of people that live there. And why we did that? Because we wanted to demonstrate, we wanted to essentially have an answer ready for all those who said, you cannot do that. That's impossible, that is too difficult. And we actually wanted to show them that you can actually take environmental management and, of course, within reason and proportionality, do something like that in a country like also Afghanistan. And we also wanted to change the mindset and have our people understand that when we talk about environment, we talk about the future of these countries, that the argument, they have other things to worry about, should not be there. So actually our office in Afghanistan it's an amazing office. Our team there is so committed. So many of them, actually, they told us so many times, what we have learned, what we have done, we also bring it to our own homes. We are installing solar power panels in our office, but before installing solar panels there, our team has completely rewired their system. They have optimized the generators to make sure that they consume as little as possible of the fuel they need. Our local colleagues has gone on the market, tried to make sure they get the best fuel quality for the generators, also to reduce their emissions. A few years ago, they went plastic-free, single-use plastic-free. They make sure that everything in the cafe is wrapped up now in paper. There is no more bags. They have towel bags everywhere. The accommodation before, everybody, when I got there, I received my bottle of water, of course, all plastic bottles. Now they have the big containers, the large one in every accommodation that gets taken back. They have even found a local recycling workshop that takes some of the plastic and make buckets and pipelines. And this is in Kabul. So I always tell this story when I say to people, don't be afraid, don't get the argument, this is not possible. And I've tried that so many times. Another story I can very shortly share is about our office in Ghana. The first time we went there, they told me, we don't recycle, it's Africa. And I said, okay, start to talk with people, start to go, identify a couple of easy streams. Try with paper, go to the private, go to the non-profit. After 1 year, they had 4 streams of recycling in place. So also in Africa, you can recycle. So you can do it in these places, you can do it everywhere. So maybe some of you don't have offices there, but I hope the message that we got from our amazing colleagues there, it's clear. Another thing that I also want to quickly mention is that something that for sure you have is your footprint for travel. Air travel, it's in the type of organization we run, is normally a big component of our emissions. In Europe, so we are lucky enough to have policies that we are finding quite progressive. For instance, the default modality of travel in Europe is economy. 94% actually of our travel trips happen in economy class. And that already helps a lot to keep emission low. We also have a provision in our travel policy saying that if in our travel tool to alternatives, one of them has lower carbon footprint, you can go for that one if the price difference is less than $250. So we thought we were very, very well placed. And then COVID came. And now we know all where we are, right, with travel. And actually, COVID has shown us that we thought we were advanced and almost done there. And actually, COVID showed us that we're not. We were too modest. And there were a wealth of possibility of rethinking travel and simply traveling rest that we didn't see. So yeah, we need to keep challenging ourselves because sometimes there are corners we don't see. And sometimes, things that happen for the worst, like this terrible pandemic, can still, help us see angles of improvement. So these are a few takeaways from my side that I hope will inspire the new and the already existing sustainability programs that you are running. Over to you, Monica.
Thanks, Neves, for those insights. And I'm sure it was quite a struggle, and we can get more details of how you went about doing the ISO in Afghanistan. Because I know when at the World Bank, we tried to do LEED certification for our building in South Sudan. One of the issues was that even getting the money for getting the materials to a country like that, that was a struggle for us. So yeah, there's a lot of details behind the challenges we've tackled over the years. So thank you so much, Nieves. So let's turn really quickly to Shoa with UNEP, and I've known Shoa for so long as well. And I'm sure that there are lots of stories we will hear from him. So Shoa, off to you.
Thank you, Monica. Greetings, everybody from Nairobi, Kenya, the headquarters of the United Nations Environment Programme. Just a little bit about the UN agency I work for. UNEP is tasked with basically improving the environmental conditions at a policy level in the world for member states, and that includes basically 180 countries. Its job is consensus building, so we do have a lot of meetings, a lot of people coming together, either training or making decisions. And this also leads to a lot of air travel, international air travel, something we've had to grapple with. I'll start off by saying what our climate targets were and how that progressed. The old Secretary General Ban Ki-moon mentioned that climate change is the environmental challenge of our times. And so we took this issue very seriously. And back in 2008, we started actually measuring our footprint, our climate footprint, to see how much we emit. And back then we saw that actually over 95% of all our emissions were from flights. It was a huge amount. And, we just had people jetting around, and we tried all manner of things to reduce that. A 3% target reduction was put year on year. I should mention that we did buy offsets to completely neutralize and make ourselves a net zero emission agency. So that despite the fact that we were trying to reduce our footprint, we're also neutralizing our emissions. And later on, we actually had a goal of reducing our emissions, and this is fairly new, but by 45%. This is based on a 2010 baseline that we had. And the International Panel on Climate Change, this is what they recommend if we are to keep the temperature of the globe from reaching 1.5 degrees centigrade increase. We have to really cut a lot, and 45%. This goal was actually met in 2016 through austerity. People were flying less, and that was good. Others were downgrading their flights. And we really didn't know how much more we could cut before it actually started interfering with our function, and the pandemic has done that for us. So while we are having to sit at home and we think we can't do things, we can actually manage about 80 to 90% of what we normally manage virtually. So I think in the future for us, virtual meetings are going to be the norm, and hopefully travel to the nice parts of the world would then be the exception. Having said that, there are other aspects that we have worked on. We have a headquarters that has a solar panel on the roof that has a payback of about 10 years. Electricity in Kenya is very expensive. I know that, for example, in the US, a lot of different entities, especially schools. Schools are putting some 80% more solar panels on their roofs. This is an economic as well as a emissions climate strategy, which they're seeing. We have challenges because of the infrastructure we have at headquarters in Nairobi, but nevertheless, we've managed to create 4 streams for recycling for 2-3 years now, and that's going well. Other offices we have in Europe are already doing this de facto, because the country does it. Geneva, Switzerland is a case in point. But they don't want to go on too much more about what we're doing. Just to say that all of this is, of course, based on staff appreciation of what we're doing and understanding, without which really all of these plans can fall apart. I also want to commend the US. They have actually managed to cut their climate emissions by some 3% in the past years. And this has nothing to do with governmental intervention, but actually it's businesses taking this on themselves to do this. So this is wonderful. And I highly encourage you to engage in this exercise and leave a planet for the future for our children. With that, let me stop and see if there's any questions, or over to Monica, actually.
Thank you so much, Shoa. And as you can see, we wanted to give you a flavor of the different impacts that we really worked on within our organizations. But as you will note, climate bubbled up. So the emissions from our buildings, as Evelyn mentioned a little bit, how LEED was used for that, or Neves mentioned how ISO certifications was used to address the emissions and the impacts from our buildings, as well as travel, which both Neves and Shoa talked about, the emissions from our travel and how important that is for us to tackle. And underlying all of that is our mission, but also the drive for staff to see how we're walking the talk, how we really are being the best self, right? Best future of ourselves, and how we're leaving a planet that's much more sustainable for our future generations, our kids, and so on. So when we were planning this panel, we asked this question to the organizers to Liz and so on, about exactly what is the biggest impact for credit unions. So that's one of the key topics that came up was supply chains. So that leads us to our second poll question, which is, do you engage your vendors or have a sustainability purchasing guideline, document, or policy? Yes or no? And while you're thinking and responding to us on that, I totally recognize that we might actually go over our time, but hopefully this next round with the panel, we can just talk quickly 1 minute on this so we can have enough time at the end to answer some of the questions. So let's see the answers. So do you have a sustainability purchasing guideline or engage with the vendors? And it's half-half. Okay, that's interesting. So with that, if I can ask, perhaps, again, Evelyn, if you want to start a little bit about how IMF has engaged with your vendors and what does that look like? Again, let's try to keep it to 1 minute each. Thanks. Evelyn, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yes, sorry about that. I forgot I was using Zoom. I'm used to using WebEx. Apologies. So what we've done is we've began incorporating over the past 6 years sustainability language into vendor contracts. So not just our facilities contract vendors, but other vendors. What do we want them to provide to us, and how do we want it provided? It's not just the language like, do you have a sustainability program, but what are the KPIs that you're going to be adhering to for us, and how can we make sure that those KPIs match with our sustainability goals? So it's worked out very well. We are coming into some new vendors now, and so we've basically began to build it up even further, and it's gone well. We have vendors that are actually trying to come up with innovative ways of adhering to our sustainability policy and guidelines, which is a lot of fun because you learn things that you hadn't thought of before. So it's been a great journey with our vendors. Back to you, Monica.
Thanks, Evelyn. So Susan, a little bit about vendors from you. Susan, you're on mute as well.
No matter where you are in your program, there are different ways to approach your vendors. And for us, it began with we knew we had to measure what our impact was. So once we had done a carbon footprint in 2007 and determined what our biggest piece was, which the fact for us was that we produced a magazine, we went to our two main vendors who handled that, and we did a full life cycle assessment because that was 93% of our footprint. So similarly, if you do a measurement and figure out what is the biggest emission footprint you have in your building, or maybe the biggest issue you have in your space, if you're in a drought area or you have a lot of waste that, the cost is driving you nuts, pick that one big thing, figure out who your main vendors you're working with and talk to them. Ask if they're willing to measure and see where their waste is, because their waste is your waste. If they're wasting money or spending emissions on something, it all comes back to you as well, because you chose them and you've let them do whatever. Once we had set goals and we had worked with them to reduce their footprint, which reduced ours, we eventually had a sustainability policy, which is live online, and I've shared the link. And you can see we laid out what we cared about and we're working on, and said to all our vendors, we want you to pay attention to these things too. We know that it's a journey and you might not be as far along as we are, but we want to know that you're working on it. So we're telling you what's important to us. And then we made sure to put that policy out to make our vendors aware of it and ask them if they had policies. So like Evelyn said, we could learn from them as well. And now we're at the point where we, like Evelyn, are making sure that these policies of ours are in the contracts that we sign. So you might be at different levels and you can start anywhere along the line, but the key is talk to your vendors, because many of them, they might be ahead of you or they might be willing to walk with you, but if you haven't asked them the question, they don't know that you're willing to work with them on that.
Very good point, Susan. Nives, do you want to go next?
Sure. So in UNOPS, we started to work on with vendors actually on sustainable procurement, how we call it, about 15 years ago. So it's we are actually one of the first United Nations agency to pick this up. And so in a way, I think I can even push it to say that sustainable procurement is kind of embedded in what we do now. I think also we were one of the first agency already some years ago to have the first procurement manual that was like fully adopting and embedding sustainable procurement. So there is essentially no bureaucratic barriers or limitation for our teams in the field and here in HQ to do sustainable procurement. We are very decentralized, so many of the procurement decisions are not taken here, are taken in the field, but we train, we support, we encourage our colleagues. And lately, last year, we took one final step and we introduced something that we call the Sustainable Procurement Framework that has started to make sustainable procurement mandatory step by step on tenders. And we're going to grow on that. We also have an exclusion list of things that, for instance, are not allowed to be bought anymore, single-use plastic being one of them. So that's how we take it. So it's yes, it's for us it's a very important area as well.
Nives, would you be able to share links to your procurement manual as well? I think there's also a UN procurement manual, and either you or Shoa, if you can find that and share that link, that would be great.
Yeah, of course, we're very rule-based, so those are important for us.
Yes, very good point. Shoa, on to you.
Thank you, Monica. The UN Secretariat, of which UNEP is part, it consists of about 30 UN agencies, procures about $15 billion worth of goods every year. And so it's very important that we get this right. And the tendering process goes on, where you can put all the different requirements that you have. Of late, there have been more sustainability requirements, often with resource efficiency in mind, fuel usage, Energy Star grade things, and so on and so forth. So those have been put in there. In addition, we do try to, in our procurement, award points to those that have certifications such as ISO 14000 or environmental policies, sustainability policies. So it's a work in progress. What we also have to realize is that many of the developing countries that actually sell to the UN may not be able to meet all of these criteria. So the issue is, how do you help the supplier become more sustainable? So it's a two-way street. It's what we want, and through our influence, can we change our suppliers? And I believe that this is also very doable in the US, where you are. Awarding those that are a bit more sustainable, and then encouraging those that are not to adopt measures.
Sure, that was a very good point that you brought up about how do we manage vendors internationally. And so at the World Bank, our policies from the get-go was not to support a certain certification, as when we were looking at paper or we were looking at electronics, but rather create our own guidelines. So I remember in 2008, when I first started at the bank, we created a whole guidance document that helped us make the most comprehensive procurement of paper. It looked at, in addition to fiber, it looked at how it was brought to the warehouse, and then from the warehouse to us. So it looked at different criteria of sustainability, and sustainability is not only on environment but also on the social impact. So we considered both sides. And now, fast forward 12 years, now we actually have one person represented within our corporate procurement office as a sustainability officer, who helps embed sustainability into each and every one of the contracts. And as we're moving towards more of KPI-based contracts, the most recent being with our building management and cleaning contract, we're now looking at how do we embed our principles and key KPIs. So then they have to come up with the solutions, just like Susan said. They will come up with exactly how they're going to achieve those KPIs, but we basically say, our KPI is to make sure that we have 100% green cleaning policy, right? No toxic chemicals in our cleaning, and they will solve for that. Or we want 80% diversion rate of our waste, and then they will solve for that. So that's where we're moving now with our contracts. But this is great. I see in the chat box, people are talking and sharing their procurement policies and saying that we should not start from scratch, because again, you have a collective brain here. Feel free to reach out to us separately or reach out to us through Tom and Liz and Pamela, so that we can also share our tools. So we have one more question before we open the floor. This was more, this was discussed already a little bit, so hopefully we'll go around really quickly, but we wanted to hear, this is a poll, do you have green teams? So how do you really engage your staff? And as folks are putting answers into the poll, I would encourage our panelists to think a little about how you are engaging your staff currently in this virtual work from home environment. What does this mean? How are you really tackling the pandemic brain that we all have, and two, keeping the optimism in how we engage with staff and looking towards the future. So let's look at the responses. Oh, fantastic. A lot of people have green teams. That's great to see. Starting with Evelyn, if you can shed some light on how you have engaged your staff and what you're looking to do now in the pandemic situation.
Thank you, Monica. It's been a bit of a challenge to engage our staff. We've tried in the past to come up with green teams. We've had different types of events where we've invited our staff to be involved. It's been a challenge. It hasn't been as easy as developing a general green team amongst staff. What we're actually doing now is looking at it in a different way. We are using a behavioral firm to actually look at how staff take in communication and knowledge about what we've been trying to share with them regarding sustainability that the fund has been adhering to for all these years. And so what we've learned is that they don't really understand. The education may not be as thorough as we thought it was. So they don't understand the verbs, the terms. And so it's we're looking at it in terms of developing another type of Green Team 2.0 is what we're calling it, getting them involved. And first of all, educating them, not just in the internet notices or flyers we have out or whatever it may be, but also just letting them be involved in our training programs, giving them a training program so that they can speak the same language that we do, so that they can know where to help. And most of what I know, most of your organizations are thinking about the SDGs, and that's the biggest thing that we've gotten is, well, how does all this fit into the SDGs? So we're doing that education right now, and we're going to be moving forward with that, especially in this COVID environment.
Thanks, Evelyn. Susan?
I'll make my answer very quick. I'll say one, it's all education. Put it in your orientations. Let staff know when they walk in the door what your goals as an organization are. Send reminders and have fun with it. Whatever fits with the culture of your organization. I mean, we had an engineer dress up as a vampire and hand out candy and when people answered questions about saving energy. And it was all these different ways of engaging them to help them understand what we're trying to do and why. We stuck little things out around the building for kids to find on Bring Your Kid to Work Day. And so we found ways you have to find different ways to approach the education of your staff. So it's not the same old that they're not even looking at anymore. Look for things that you can have some fun with it, because there's so much information. You need to find different ways to get their attention.
That's a great. Sorry, go ahead.
Another thing, when you achieve things, remind them of what they have helped you achieve. You've got to, not just the goals and where we're going, but let them know what they have helped you accomplish.
Great. Thank you, Susan. Neves.
Yeah, I will confirm what Susan said. Have fun with it. Recently, last month, we celebrated the first International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies, which is about air pollution, and it's a very serious topic because it's actually one of the main killers in the world, like the bad quality of air. And we also felt like it's difficult to connect with our colleagues, and everybody's already there is a heavy environment. People are concerned about COVID, so we decided to spin it, and we made a quiz. And we actually had colleagues to create teams also across offices to break a little bit this distance that we have. And the colleagues came up with all kind of like fun names, like the blue pandas or the clean air monsters and stuff like that. And then we had a challenge day, and there is a small website when you have like really the quiz with the countdown, the thrilling music. They can see the teams racing against each other. And the questions are serious, and they hopefully make you think. And then in the end, there is a winner, which in our case won some offsets from a cook stove project in Malawi. So it was also for a good cause, and people loved it. And it make you think, it make you have fun, and yeah, it's great, I think.
Can I join? Thanks, Neves. Shoa, on to you.
We have basically two green teams. One is called Step by Step, and it's manned by the young. A lot of interns and perhaps people who haven't been jaded by the world yet. And they do a lot. It's very action-oriented. The other team we have is actually a committee composed of staff, so they decide the direction in which green projects we do, and what the interest of the staff is. So it's very important to have feedback from the organization, people who work there, as to what it is they want. Now also bear in mind that as you work on the greenness and sustainability of the agency, a lot of people are actually also interested in applying these to their own lives. For example, we have a waste management system within UNEP, however, for recycling, but we get a lot of questions about, well, how can I get this for my apartment or for my house? So you will get some scope creep, and you have to be ready to deal with what it is that people really want. How do you get rid of batteries? just simple things like that. So it's not all about corporate. You have to also make it relevant to people's lives.
Very good point, Shoa. So I'm being informed that we're not going to have time for questions, but I see that we can respond to them in the chat box. So I'm hopeful that you can keep your questions coming, because we have those tools. We'll just point you in those directions or set up those bilateral conversations. But before we do close out, our last question to the panelists was similar to what I had asked Taylor earlier, which is, what is your suggestion for credit unions as they start this journey, or at this point during the COVID recovery? Like, what is your suggestion that credit unions can do? And I just want to say that, again, we looked at the biggest impacts from a greening perspective for our internal operations, but obviously credit unions' biggest impact is how you're investing your money. And that includes investing towards not only green projects, but greening your funding. So basically looking at how you are investing towards communities, or investing towards projects that looking at reducing carbon or promoting biodiversity solutions and so on. But also, how are you investing your own money in other things, like, looking at making sure you're not investing in some of those dirty, big impact issues. So that's my little thing, but I'm going to, again, ask the panelists 30 seconds on.
No. I'm not Monica. I'm going to ask him. Why don't we bring that to the breakout rooms, right? So that we can,
all right. I'm so sorry,
right.
Tom.
I think that's a great. It's okay. It's okay. I do want to let the attendees have a moment to interact with each other verbally. I know there's so much going on in the chat. I think we take that right there, and I think we're going to have some of the panelists join us in the breakout rooms too, so we can kind of take that into our interactive section. We'll do that for about 5 to 10 minutes, about 5 minutes actually now, looking at the time. And then we'll come back and hopefully we'll post some of that great feedback. But thank you, all of our panelists. Saeed, our coordinator, is going to break us into our room. So hopefully everyone's connected their audio and video together, so you all end up in the same room. And let's kind of talk about what we've heard and the sort of operational challenges and wins, and see what we learn from each other, off mic finally. So Saeed, why don't you take us into our breakout rooms? Everyone just accept the breakout room invitation as it joins. Thank you. Please, someone to scribe as well. Thanks. Welcome back, everybody who is back. So hopefully everyone was able to join a breakout room, and continue that conversation in the breakout room. We'll try to give people a few more minutes to rejoin us before we jump into our next session here. But we were very lucky to have one of our panelists from the previous discussion in our breakout room. So that was really valuable. I'm posting a couple of our notes that we had into the chat. And we'll ask attendees when they come back. We'll give everybody, look at that participant number, get back to where it was, where it was before. But I will mention that one of the things that came up in our breakout room was accounting for the impact of teleworking on terms of operational control and sustainability, right? So that was I don't know if everyone saw that, but here was some interesting research that was shared by Susan in our breakout room. So you can take a look at that. So welcome back. Come back, everyone. Going to ask Saeed. Saeed, can you come off mic and let me know if we have most of our participants back into the main session?
Hey, Tom, thanks. Looks like we may be still missing about 15 to 20.
All right, let's try.
Okay. Okay. And one more quick question, Saeed. Did we bring Moramay back from your Global Compact?
Yes, I'm here, Tom.
Hi, okay, great. Good to see you. Good to hear from you. Okay. All right. All right, well, we'll get started. I think hopefully those who come back from the session will just jump right in. So first, everybody, I know we're running a little behind, so we're going to just go ahead and ask all the feedback you had in your breakout rooms. Hopefully, please just post them into the chat. We had some really interesting conversations on operations, operational impact, supplier base, on remote work. All really great in our little breakout room, the few minutes we had. So please post them into the chat, anything that you want to share. We're going to try to collect all of these great resources, make them available. We will eventually have we'll talk about our LinkedIn group that everyone can join, and where we'll try to keep all this, all these great public resources available. And speaking of great resources, I'm really happy to introduce Moramay from UN Global Compact. And we're going to be talking today about their SDG Action Manager. SDG Action Manager is a great impact management solution that enables organizations to assess where they are in relation to key sustainable principles, the environment, labor, anti-corruption, managing risk. We completed our baseline review, and the findings really surprised us. You could imagine. And it was incredibly valuable, for an organization like UNFCU that has been trying to follow best practices and do all the sort of transparency and follow the right steps on sustainability. When we took the Action Manager, just in the baseline section, we realized we had, despite all our best efforts, we had some blind spots. We're like, oh yeah, why don't we have this policy on human rights? Why is that something that was a blind spot to us, despite everything we had done, considering the type of organization we wanted to be? So, you can see this kind of tool, this kind of confidential tool that lets you self-assess, can have really great way to begin, or at least see where you are according to some of the best practices. And again, to take us on this tour, we have Moramay Navarro Perez. Moramay is the Manager of Strategic Development at the United Nations Global Compact in New York, having worked in nearly a decade in corporate sustainability, more specifically in anti-corruption, transparency, government affairs. Moramay's current focus is on sustainability metrics. And what luck, Moramay, we're really delighted you can join us and to really share this incredible tool with our attendees. So please, Moramay.
Great, thank you so much, Tom, and hello to everybody. Thank you also to UNFCU for the invitation to be here and show you and everybody all the good things that can be done with this tool that we developed in collaboration with B-Lab. So if you can give me a couple of seconds, I will share my screen. I have some slides, and we'll also want to give you a very quick demo, a tour of the tool. So very briefly, I'll just give people a reminder of what the UNGC is, and then we'll just jump right into the tool. Very briefly, just as a reminder, the GC was born in 2000 with Kofi Annan to provide a human face to the global market, bringing companies together in support of 10 principles in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. And as of today, we have about 10,000 companies committed to the 10 principles on the UN Global Compact. We are the largest corporate sustainability initiative. There's also 3,000 non-business members in about 160 countries. And we also have about 60 plus local networks all around the world. So basically, the GC is more of a convening platform and providing guidance to participants in the implementation of these 10 principles and UN goals such as the SDGs. So to give a little bit of a background of why this tool was created, we know now that the world is actually not on track to achieve the global goals. Based on a progress report that the UN Global Compact did in 2019, we know that there's really no country yet on track to achieve the goals by 2030. Also, other UN reports have showed that the world is really not headed toward 3.9 degree Celsius temperature rise by the end of the century. So we're very far off track from the 1.5 threshold that is needed to limit the worst impacts of climate change. And also, according to the IPCC, we really need to have emissions by 2030 to avoid some of the worst outcomes. In addition, CEOs acknowledge that business contribution is falling short. In 2019, 48% of companies say that they're implementing sustainability into their operations, while 21% of CEOs really feel that business is currently playing a critical role in contributing to the global goals. However, this is really down from the levels of confidence and commitment that we had in 2016, right when the SDGs were launched, where 78% of CEOs actually felt that there were good opportunities to work towards and contribute to the global goals through their core business. So really, this is kind of the background. There's still a lot of need for contribution from the private sector. And so this is why we, in collaboration with B-Lab, partner up to say, okay, maybe there is a need in the marketplace that can really help companies understand a little bit better and self-assess where they are on the SDGs and also on the 10 principles. So what is the Action Manager, the SDG Action Manager? As I mentioned, we collaborated with B-Lab, who's also a very close partner in the sense that we both have very good global outreach. For some of you, may know, there's the B Corp certification, which is achieved through B-Lab's B Impact Assessment. So they're very knowledgeable on these types of self-assessments, and they also have very powerful data analytics platforms. At the same time, we have the 10 principles, which is a great framework for companies to understand how to implement sustainability. And we share the mission of contributing to a better world and using business as a force for good in the achievement of the SDGs. So as Tom mentioned, the tool is a web-based impact management solution. The idea is that it helps companies understand and assess where they are in the SDGs. It's a self-assessment. It also helps companies or other organizations benchmark And with this information, with this assessment and comparison, they can then improve and pinpoint particular actions that they can do to better improve their action towards the SDGs. So the tool, just to make emphasis on this, is free of use. The information is completely private and confidential for the user. There's no use by us or BLab from that information. And it's actually available in 5 languages: English, French, Italian, Portuguese, and Spanish. Just to give you a quick overview of the main functionalities and features of the tool, and then I'll jump right into the demo so you get a feel of what the tool is like. The user can find the starting point, which means with the company profile, when the user signs up to the tool, the company profile asks the user about the sector, the industry, the size of the company, the type of organization, and it tailors the content and recommends a number of SDGs based on that to the user. So this is why we're saying it can help find the starting point with a quick recommendation of which SDGs matter the most based on that company profile. At the same time, you can get a clear view of how your operations, the supply chain, and the business model of that organization can actually create impact. And there's also the notion of risk areas and how to identify for particular SDGs. So the user can actually understand very clearly in these sections of the business where they're failing or where they need to be doing more. At the same time, they can set goals and track improvement. So the tool allows for the user to set goals within a particular time frame and be able to come back to those and be able to know, okay, we've achieved this for this particular area. And it can also be a collaborative effort. So the user can tag different team members based on different people's expertise, and different people in the organization can work together and collaborate to fill out the self-assessment. At the same time, there's a notion that the tool is very educational, of course, because what it's trying to do is also list all the practices and the best practices that organizations can be doing to improve. And at the same time, there's also an offering of resources. So companies or organizations can look into particular issues and be directed to resources in the UNGC library. And so they can expand their knowledge on particular areas. So I'm just going to go into the demo right now and show everybody where they can get the tool, how they can sign in, and what they're going to find in the tool. So bear with me a couple of seconds. You can access by going to the UN Global Compact's website. This is the website, the SDG Action Manager, and access the tool here. I am not going to fill out everything given the amount of time that we have for this, but this is where you get started. You provide all your information on your company or organization's profile. There's an option, for example, to say we're a financial and insurance activities type of user, so you can use that to provide information on the tool and sign up as a financial insurance activities user, for example. So I'll be signing into a mock-up account that I created for a food manufacturer company. You'll land in this homepage, but you want to go here on the SDG Action Manager tab to actually get started. So as I mentioned with the company profile, the tool will customize the information that you'll see and the modules that you'll be recommended, meaning that the SDGs that you're recommended to use. The tool provides a very simple materiality analysis based on the World Benchmarking Alliance's market analysis, which is an analysis between SDGs and industry. But we recommend that all users do a more thorough materiality analysis to understand if they're in need of filling out more modules or completing more SDGs. As I mentioned, I've been recommended 11 SDGs, which can be found here at the beginning. It doesn't mean that organizations cannot fill out other SDGs, which are pointed out here in the remaining section. There is one thing, for anyone to finish the SDG modules, they have to finish the SDG baseline first, which is actually based on the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact. I'll just take a quick view of what the baseline module looks like. It's rooted, as I mentioned, in the 10 principles, so it includes questions about commitments to human rights, environment, anti-corruption, and labor practices that are core to all organizations. So you'll see that the module is organized in questions around those areas: human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. To show you a little bit of other functionalities, as I mentioned, the user is expected to answer the questions. They can click next and save, but if, for example, they're not sure about that question or don't know how to go, about responding or what the answer is, they can either bookmark, or whether they feel like can improve on this section, they can set this as a goal. And so by clicking that start button, they can see how they replied to the question, and they can then set the goal and say, well, we really need to improve here. You can add notes, and you can set a deadline for when you want to fulfill this particular question and area. And you can also receive email reminders to be constantly reminded on the progress that you need to make on this particular area. In addition, you'll see that there are points earned as the user answers. There's particular points and score that the user will receive, and it will show over here as a percentage, as a total percentage, but it's only for that particular module. The SDG Action Manager does not aggregate the scoring for all the modules, because what we want to do is actually show the user where they're doing, how they're performing on each of these modules. So that's part of the functionality. The other thing is people can also, as I mentioned, learn more about what is being asked. By clicking learn, they can understand better what the question is trying to get to. And in terms of clicking here, implementation, they can get additional resources suggested if they would like to explore more on that particular topic. So quickly, because I know we don't have a lot of time, I'll also head to show you the one module on the SDGs. As I mentioned, these modules are divided into subsections so that the user can understand how they're performing in terms of their business model, their internal operations, the supply chain, and collective action in terms of partnerships. Also, they can assess gaps and challenges that they're facing by responding to these questions here in terms of risk level. And there are two nice functionalities, which are one, the reports. By clicking here on the SDG performance, as I mentioned, they will get an idea of how much they scored on their particular modules. If they click here on benchmarks, then they're able to compare that score to the country score, the sector, how you're performing, across your sector and across your company size. So it'll give you a good idea of how you're performing on that particular topic. So I think those are the most relevant features. There's one last that I would like to show, which is, here on settings. Team members is where you can actually add contributors to the self-assessment. And you can add them and get them invited over email to be able to fulfill this together. So this is the very quick overview of the tool. Perhaps I'll head to presentation again and Q&A if anybody has any questions of how the tool is used and what can be achieved with the tool.
No questions. I don't see anything, but I did post, by the way, everybody, the link to the SDG Action Manager in the chat. So, and again, great assessment tool. I know a lot of people maybe, doesn't really even matter where you are, where you think you are in your sustainability journey. But even if you're just beginning and you want to know where you are, where you can begin to engage with sustainability and alignment to the SDG, UN SDGs, incredibly fantastic tool, really important to sort of self-assess to begin where those opportunities may be for improvement and what you may be already doing, and you might be further along than you think. So, thank you, Moramay.
Yeah,
I posted it again into the chat.
That's great.
And again.
Oh, I would just like to emphasize, that the tool is free of use for it's multi-stakeholder. It's mainly done for companies, but any organization, any other type of stakeholder can make use of the tool, and it's completely confidential. It's last thing, it's not a public disclosure tool. The information is basically, it's not verified information, so just you just fill it out with the best of your knowledge, and it's mostly a learning opportunity. So I encourage everybody to use it.
And we encourage everybody to also engage with you in Global Compact broadly. Think about becoming as we move along, maybe becoming signatory. It's a fantastic, I think the largest, I think it is the largest sort of private sector engagement on sustainability, especially certainly coming out of the UN. So fantastic. Thank you, Moramay.
Thank you.
Again, our next, I do apologize, we're running a little bit late, so I hope all of you can stay on a little past 1:30, but we do have an exciting credit union panel coming up, and here to lead our panel, Growing Your Credit Union's Impact Through Sustainable Investments, is Paul Haradine. Paul is the Director of Impact Market Development at Clearwater Credit Union. A lot to say about Clearwater, a fantastic organization in Missoula, Montana. Joining Paul for what we know is going to be a really incredible, timely conversation as a terrific panel with international as well as bi-coastal know-how. So please pass it over to Paul. Take it away.
Thank you, Tom. And just a quick note, would you like us to go kind of the full 40 on this, or try and shave a little time? I can shorten my preamble, certainly.
If you could, that'd be fantastic. I mean, I know we'll all stay connected afterwards, but yeah, if you can, try to get as close to wrapping up around 1:30, that'd be fantastic. So we don't keep people hanging on too much longer. But thanks, Paul.
Sure, happy to do it. Thank you, and thank you for putting all this on. So the topic of this panel is growing credit union impact through sustainable investment. That's seemingly a very simple topic, but it actually gets complex pretty fast as we start to think about what sustainable means and what investment means. As credit unions, making economically sustainable investments into our communities is sort of what we do. But we're thinking here about sustainability in a broader sense. Ecological sustainability, certainly, but also just and equitable economies and resilient communities. So rather than spend a lot of time trying to nail down a definition of what sustainable investment means, I'd like to have our panelists talk about what it means to them and how they're putting this into practice. And one of the goals we really have with this panel is to provide inspiration, but also resources. Speaking personally, I know that at Clearwater, when we were developing a solar loan product, Vermont State Employees Credit Union was invaluable with their expertise and experience, and that really helped us develop that. So as we go through this panel, I want to just encourage you to consider the panelists' resources, and we will be sharing contact information afterwards, and to reach out if you would like to get a little more information as you go down this journey yourself. Likewise, there will be a couple of poll questions along the way, and we hope to share those as well, just to provide a starting point for you as you get into this yourself. a brief note on the structure of this. Basically, I will introduce each of the panelists and ask them to say a few words about their organization and what they're up to. And then I'll be asking each of them a question about a particularly interesting aspect of their work. While we're doing that, we do want to encourage some back and forth with all of you. So I'm going to encourage you to put your questions into the chat. Tom will be monitoring that and can bring those forward. At the end of that, if there's time permitting, we'll have an open Q&A. So how I'd like to start is just to kind of introduce our organizations briefly and then get into the questions. So I'll just start with ourselves here. We are a Clearwater Credit Union. We're about a $600 million credit union in Western Montana. We are CDFI, and we do engage in a sort of broad array of what we would consider to be sustainable investments. Certainly day-to-day community lending, but also a suite of financial products for kind of smaller but important economic problems. For instance, we launched a program to fund manufactured housing purchases, which are typically difficult to finance as they're considered personal property loans and not real estate. We also have solar loan programs. We're trying to get more involved in sustainable agriculture, and we're putting this into practice in our operations as well. This is a picture of a new branch that we just opened. This was a remodel of an existing building, so we tried to keep as much material as we could. This building is going to be LEED Silver certified. It's net zero. Off to the right, you can actually see a little bit of a solar panel covering our drive-through. And it's sided with reclaimed lumber from a local wildfire in the pretty severe 2017 fire season. So that's a little bit about Clearwater. Next up, I'd like to turn it over to Layli Ramahi. She is with the UN, let me grab my notes here, the UN Environment Program Finance Initiative, where she is the North American Network Coordinator. So Layli, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, thank you so much, Paul, and I'm going to take your lead. I'm going to be very quick and try to be very timely. I'm very happy to be here and to introduce UNEP-FI very quickly. As we are known, as you mentioned, we are the UN Environment Program Finance Initiative, which is a public-private partnership between the UN Environment Program and the Finance Initiative that was launched back at the Rio Earth Summit in 1992, which is basically where a group of visionaries came and saw the important role of private finance that it has to do in terms of supporting sustainability and pushing it forward. In our work, we work with our members across banks, financial insurers, and investors globally, with over 300 financial institutions and over 100 financial institutions that are supporting our work to grow sustainability through leveraging the UN's role as a convener to push the sustainable finance agenda forward. I think today I would like to talk more about the way we cultivate and catalyze that engagement with the financial sector through supporting the integration of sustainability across the board by supporting the norms and the best practices and the tools and methodologies, and basically known through cultivating and empowering through the principles. The first principles that are globally known are the principles for responsible investment, where UNEP-FI and UNGC actually work together and support the principles for responsible investment as the guidance for the industry. Then UNEP-FI worked with the insurance industry to launch the principles for sustainable insurance, which worked with the insurance industry on integrating sustainability and supporting their industry's role in sustainable development. And last but not least, celebrating almost a year now, we launched the Principles for Sustainable Banking, which are the guidance and the overarching framework to support the embedding of sustainability, and where we're going to talk about impact for the banking industry.
Great, thank you, Layli, and I will come back to you to ask you more about those the principles. Next up, we have Richard Colavecchio. Richard is the first VP of Investment Management at UN Federal Credit Union, where he oversees the management of the investment portfolio. Richard, could you tell us a little bit about UNFCU?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. How's everyone doing? Nice to meet you all today, of course. My name is Rich Colavecchio. I'm the FVP of Investment Management at UNFCU. Of course, we've been talking a lot about UNFCU here today, but in terms of what I do, what my group does specifically, I've been with the credit union now 12 years. We manage UNFCU's securities investment portfolio. We're a team of 7. We cover portfolio strategy and trade execution, credit and portfolio analysis and trade operations as well. We manage a $2.5 billion portfolio, actually across 3 portfolios, majority of which is in a core U.S. fixed income portfolio, as well as 2 smaller non-core portfolios that covers our charitable donation account and our employee benefit pre-funding account as well. Later on, I'll talk a little bit more specifically about options that credit unions have in impact investing overall.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. And definitely looking forward to hearing more about that. Next up, we have Melissa Malkin-Weber. Melissa is the Sustainability Director at Self-Help Credit Union. And Melissa, can you tell us a little bit about Self-Help?
Hey, everyone. Really glad to be here today. And thanks for the opportunity to sort of get to know all of you. Self-Help Credit Union and Ventures Fund is a family of organizations. And on the credit union side, we have both a state and a federal credit union on through reaching a variety of states from California to North Carolina to Florida with 151,000 members. And over the years, we've looked to loan products on our commercial lending side and our consumer lending, as well as our operations, to increase our impact by connecting those dots between environmental practices, pollution, and impacts to our members.
Terrific, thank you. And finally, we have Simeon Chapin. Simeon is the, let me get your title right. So you have essentially the same title as me. The first VP of,
Maybe that's your title, Paul.
Community Impact Officer. That's the one. At Vermont State Employees Credit Union. Could you tell us a little bit about VSECU?
Sure. Thank you very much. And thanks to all the panelists on this and everyone here today. It's great to be with you all pushing sustainability forward. So VSECU, we're a state chartered credit union. We're chartered in the state of Vermont. We're 900 million in assets and growing. We started as a state employee seg group and then have expanded to the full state. And we actually have expanded outside of the state due to one of our environmental impact lending programs, where if you're a member of the Northeast Sustainability Association, you can also join VSECU. To be kind of quick, right? I'm trying to jump through some stuff. I think foremost of what I want to share is at VSECU, we try to put sustainability and the sustainability mindset into everything that we're doing. We really have really worked to not have it be a standalone program or a separate thing from our core business, and try to really integrate the sustainability mindset into everything we do as we progress. I put this up here, on the slide here. This is our essential intent, and it's really speaking to the measurement that we are looking to do. We have a value statement or a value proposition that says make change simply by banking. It's based on the fact that we're a cooperative and that we really, through what we do, we look to make change in the world. But our essential intent is kind of how we're measuring that. So it takes 3 areas: financial resiliency, member value, and then social impact, and puts them side by side in this framework to be able to show our impact. Specifically around triple bottom line assets, you'll see that as one of those categories in social impact. We have a strong, and those assets are defined as money at risk that supports individuals or enterprises that deliver impact in at least one of the 3 categories of people, planet, or prosperity. And so we've gone through our existing portfolio, as well as then looked to see what we can be developed to be able to track our assets in those places. Currently, we're at 51% of our assets are in TBL. And those include things like, as Paul mentioned earlier, our efficiency lending programs, which does weatherization for leaky homes, efficient upgrades for equipment, vehicles, zero and low emission vehicles, and then also has solar energy development, both for residential as well as for commercial purposes. Social impacts include things like lending to nonprofits, emergency loans, which we saw a lot of during this pandemic, and other crises that happened in earlier years. And then financial impacts, which are loans that go towards first-time home ownership program, mobile loans, as Paul mentioned. We also have a program for mobile homes, and as those are an easy way for people to get started in home ownership, as well as mortgages in economic development geographies. We've put those into this bucket as well. We've, in terms of the internal work of our organization towards environmental sustainability and social sustainability particularly, we've worked on an operational impact report inspired in part by Clearwater's operational impact report, which they published, I think, 2 years ago, and joined the North American Platform for Carbon Accounting Financials and are working through our first reporting for financial GHG impacts, which is really, I think, where we have the biggest leverage as an organization, as well as a movement to make impact on global sustainability writ large. What we've realized recently, and not realized, but reinforced, is that credit unions are really founded as a social response to an unequal economic system, and that equity within that really has to involve social equity. So, as COVID revealed, and the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many more, laid clear to us, we needed to do better as an organization. So we've adopted and started to work on a DEI process inside of our organization. We felt that that was part of our cooperative principles already, but we really wanted to make it explicit. And so the outcome of that will likely be, we're working towards it, is a mission statement around social equity to mirror the one that we had, which drove our environmental lending, our environmental mission statement. So we intend that statement to kind of spur activity, spur innovation, and spur growth and development for us to continue to do more work to do sustainability in all of its forms, right? It's not just environment. You have to have equity to be able to have true sustainability. So we're really focused on that. One thing I'll say quickly, and I'm sorry, I'm going way over 2 minutes here, is a real focus on data, and more data. The tool that was just shared with us from the UN, a great place to go and put some data in. We are continuously starting with what we have in terms of data, figuring out what we need or what we don't have, and trying to build the tools inside so that we can be able to keep tracking our results. And it's both for tracking the results to prove that what we're doing, but also to do better at those things, right? You're tracking improvement as well as tracking, getting a finer point on how you make those impacts. So we're fully engaged in sustainability at VSCCU, and I look forward to talking with you all about it and learning more about everyone else's path.
Great, thank you, Simeon. So I've got some questions prepared for our panelists here to get into a little more depth on some of these. And I'll just say once again that, this is a lot of information to be presented all at once. So really, I think the best way to think about this is just a spark, right? And if anything in here sounds interesting and you want to dig into this more, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to our panelists afterwards, and they can be great resources. So Layli, you had mentioned the principles for responsible banking, and I wonder if you could talk a little more about those and about how those have been integrated into the strategic planning for organizations, or how these are applied.
For sure. Thank you, Paul. I think building on the discussion that we've had since the morning, and I think Tyler brought in some very interesting introduction to how the principles come to be in terms of how financial institutions look at it. So it's about recognizing and harnessing that ability to change and moving forward. And building on what Simeon just said, it's just in the core nature to look at a co-op and a credit union and how they work in terms of building and serving societal needs and societal goals. So the principles for responsible banking were created to fill that gap of the lack of an overarching framework that can drive sustainability internally and externally, and aligning financial institutions' objectives towards serving the greater societal objective and environmental and social equity. The principles for responsible banking are 6 basic principles that are aligned around supporting financial institutions to grow forward while serving the best for societies now and generations to come. So what do the principles for responsible banking mean for a financial institutions, for a bank, is to provide that strategic direction that can help integrate and think about the broader triple bottom line equation in terms of people, planet, and prosperity from a broader perspective, how to integrate not just at a transaction level in terms of impact, but to look at it from a broader portfolio and a strategic level. There are 6 basic principles, starting with alignment, and that is the main objective that we are talking about. It's just that the financial institution, or a bank in this case, or a credit union, the main focus is to align their strategic objective and their strategy at the most senior level of the organization with the principles of sustainable development and meeting society's goals and objectives as they are expressed, whether through national agendas or as expressed by what we know as the Sustainable Development Goals or the Paris Agreement. In terms of reaching that alignment, we are talking about the most important aspect of impact and target setting, which is the key in terms of implementing that longer term strategy. So when we're talking about impact and we're talking about target setting, what are we talking about? We're talking about harnessing that power of a financial institution to move forward and to set objectives that is aligned with their strategy to embed sustainability in everything that they do, in their product development, in their operations, in their long-term portfolio objectives. So how can we grow a business in a way that is aligned to society's goals, that we can see the value in it, but at the same time help to, with our clients, transition away from what is harming society's objectives. So to look at our work collectively and holistically, where is our negative footprint and where's our positive footprint, and to set targets that are aligned with the most impactful area that the financial institution does. So to focus on a long-term strategy that reads into the scope of the operations, the extent of the exposure that a financial organization has, and to speak about targets that are relevant and that are salient and in their intensity towards where that collective target is. The principles talk about working with your clients and transitioning with your customers in terms of moving away from what is negative and improving that positive impact. For instance, in terms of the examples that were mentioned, in terms of building holistic societal impact, we are talking about working with broader stakeholders, not just as customers, but working with civil society, working with the government, with regulators in terms of pushing the market forward, whether we're talking about carbon taxation, we're talking about disclosure, we're talking about collective climate impact. This is very important in terms of reaching that holistic transition. We are talking about embedding this broadly in our governance and our culture, and how senior management, as much as every role for people who are within the organization, that sustainability is not just a product, it's an actual internal operation, external operation, and looking at the scope 3 emissions in terms of your lending practices and your investment practices. Mm-hmm. And last, taking that accountability in terms of transparency and reporting. And how do you do that in terms of working collectively and transitioning and meeting these objectives? with the broader stakeholders. So this is what collectively the principles mean in terms of collaboration, in terms of setting an overarching framework that helps financial institutions understand impact holistically and set targets that moves all of us towards alignment with the SDGs and as expressed in Paris.
Yeah, thank you. That's great, and that seems very just critical to me, you know. And from my background, I have this knee-jerk reaction to think of sustainability, particularly on the ecological front, and looking at this holistically at the start and really being clear about what is meant by sustainability, what are the areas that the organization is interested in, and how you're going to track your progress towards them seems very important. So thank you for sharing that. Rich, I'd like to move on to you, and I will say to anybody else in the audience, please feel free to put questions into the chat as our panelists are speaking. But Rich, you know, I know often when we think about investment in the community, we basically think about making loans to our members, right, as one of our core functions. But I know that many, if not all of our organizations maintain significant investment portfolios. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you incorporate the concept of sustainability into managing the UNFCU investment portfolio.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. So in terms of investment activities, you know, U.S. credit unions are regulated by the NCUA. These regulations primarily allow for credit unions to invest in certain types of U.S. fixed income securities, which are mostly government related. So in many cases, these asset classes and investment sectors are already providing a social benefit. So for example, a wide range of agency mortgage-backed security and direct agency debt issued or guaranteed by Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie Mae, support the home loan market overall across the nation. And these support loans and or provide loans for first-time home buyers and veterans and multifamily affordable housing projects and so on. You know, other examples are small business loan pools that are securitized and guaranteed by the Small Business Administration. Debt issued by the Federal Farm Credit Bank, which that is an agency that issues loans to farmers throughout the country as well. Debt issued by the Federal Home Loan Bank system. You know, the system overall supports the entire banking system, including credit unions, the behemoth banks, of course, community banks, regional banks, and so on. You know, additionally, state and municipal securities support funding for essential government services that support communities and all the way down at the local level. These are instruments that unions can regularly participate in, and we widely do as well. And taken together, they provide a positive benefit to society overall. That said, in terms of securities that are specifically labeled as supporting social causes or green causes, in general, in the marketplaces, this is a new area, and it's limited. Furthermore, credit unions are regulated by the NCUA, so our box becomes even smaller. That said, UNFCU is still able to purchase certain securities that, particularly within the municipal space, that address support and where the proceeds go towards clean water and at the local level, clean water initiatives and pollution control and clean energy, affordable housing, community development, infrastructure, and public transit as well. Think about all of the municipal authorities that are out there that provide public transit. It's quite large, and those are instruments already available to credit unions. Additionally, specifically within our non-core portfolios, which are much smaller, we've more recently purchased some issues by the global banks that and these bond issues, the proceeds are specifically targeted for green causes and for social causes such as supporting lending to minority groups. That all said, there is one particular area that we haven't participated in yet, but we've been looking at it. And this is so-called green bonds that are under the agency umbrella for commercial mortgage-backed securities. So these are loans that go to property owners that commit to certain like green or water improvements to their building. It's a very, very new area, but it's in high demand. So the large banks have come in and made it very, I don't want to get too lost in investment terms, but have really lowered the rates on these securities. So tighten the so-called spread above risk-free securities. So it makes it very expensive to purchase these securities, and they're very long. So for us, it's not the right time to add that to our portfolio. But as rates do move higher, hopefully at one point in the years to come, it might be a sector that we looked at a little bit more, and also as it grows too in space, in size.
Yeah. Terrific, thanks. I'd like to ask you one very brief follow-up.
Yeah.
Do loan participations play a role in this? I know here at Clearwater, I think we purchased something like $10 million in solar loan participations from California as part of our investment portfolio. I don't know much.
Yeah, sure. That's something that credit unions could participate in, whether it's solar participations or perhaps even commercial real estate participations that might be for a LEED certified building, things of that nature. So those opportunities are all available for credit unions today.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. And I'll volunteer and encourage our audience to reach out to Rich if you have questions more about some of the specifics of this. I know at Clearwater, our loan portfolio is significant, relative to our size, and that is a place we could have a lot of impact. So next, I'd like to turn to Melissa, just to ask you sort of generally how sustainable investing fits into the overall mission of self-help, and how you've been able to communicate that to members if you have, and how they've received it.
Thanks very much. Our members really like our sustainability track record, and that has grown organically over the years. So we started out as a very internal grassroots kind of environmental sustainability team doing volunteer things. And that has grown to the point where we now have a special purpose green certificate of deposit for our state chartered credit union, where members and investors are holding over $10 million. I think we've got 198 unique members there. And this is very, and the way that you asked how we communicate this to them, we're using the same data analysis and impact analysis infrastructure that we use to communicate to our many different investors about all the dimensions of what we do and their impact. So we've got investors who care a lot about racial equity, and we've got investors who are primarily motivated by sustainable food systems or food deserts or low-income communities and so forth. So a lot of dimensions, some of them overlap. So we've got a lot of data analysis that's been invested in over the years. And I think it was Simeon who also said it's all about the data. So having that kind of ability to communicate what you've done has been really helpful. And then I've also spent a lot of time hanging out with our communications team and getting them involved in figuring out how to illustrate, say, recycling loans or clean energy loans, or how do you illustrate a small business loan in a green sector? Like we settled on, I think, an ice cream vendor, but in a infographic kind of a format. But it turns out it's kind of hard to illustrate that in short words, and we're all kind of nerdy, so we actually want to use a lot of words, and we've had to work to condense it. Another headline, being able to convince and get to headlines, I think, is really helpful. In our work with the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials has let us get to the point of saying, look, we're leaders in articulating the carbon footprint of our loan portfolio. And oh, by the way, we don't invest in fossil fuel projects. And that as a headline is really important to investors who are concerned about climate, and they're trying to make sure that their investments are not financing our destruction.
Terrific, thanks. Finally, Simeon, I'd like to go to you to ask you about some of the work that VSECU is doing with CUSOs, credit union service organizations. I know you're doing some really interesting and innovative things there. I wonder if you could just give a very brief description of what a CUSO is for anybody who might not know, and then describe the work that you're doing.
Sure, happy to. So as you said, a CUSO is a credit union service organization. There are many, many, many of these organizations all throughout the United States. We, VSECU, uses one. We are partnered with PSCU to help deliver technology for our digital channels, as well as call center overflow. So it's services, right? They're delivering services for us or for our members through those channels. We have a CUSO that is a wholly owned subsidiary of VSECU. Initially, it was started with another Vermont credit union to do back-end accounting services for both organizations. And after a few years, the needs at the other organization were not there anymore. And so we brought that CUSO fully underneath our organization. So, having our own CUSO, we kind of took it a different direction a little bit. The first and probably most long-term investment that we've done with it is to purchase a fuel buying group. So in Vermont, where we're located, the winters are long and very cold, and our members have a lot of their expenses tied up in heating their homes, fuel buying. And so in Vermont, people get together and negotiate prices with the fuel suppliers to be able to find a reduced rate, very much in line with our cooperative principles, doing more together than you can do as an individual, right? Collective buying power. So we bought an organized group and brought that group underneath our CUSO. So we run the group through that CUSO and negotiate prices with fuel dealers, and then turn around and offer the program to our membership, who come in and make both agreements with the fuel suppliers to get a certain amount of fuel delivered, but then we're able to help them with a clearing account to help even out their payments over the course of the year, so that they don't get spikes in their cash flow needs, as well as basically tell the fuel dealers, like, you're going to have a guaranteed source of income, right? You're not going to have the problems of maybe somebody not being able to pay their fuel bill 1 month, because you've got the backing of a credit union and the lending tools that we have to be able to support that. So that was the first thing. We've also used our CUSO, after good conversations with our regulators in Vermont, to be able to make investments into other organizations. So our CUSO, which is a wholly owned subsidiary for-profit organization, is actually making equity investments into mission-aligned organizations and mission-aligned with VSECU's mission. So as an example of a couple that we've made, we invested in a platform called Milk Money. And this is a digital platform which really is about facilitating small dollar equity investments from everyday Vermonters into small businesses in the state of Vermont. So you don't need to be an accredited investor to be able to do this. And the Milk Money tool and the organization connects those small businesses that are in a place to take on some investment, to do the growth. They've gone through their friends and family investments, and they're ready for some further investment, and connect them with people who are interested in the local circulation of economic wealth. So immediately the connection's right. You got the small business, and you've got their supporters, and you got people who are trying to support that business, both with maybe their individual local economic purchases, but also, it's like Kickstarter. They make an investment in this company, but they're getting a lot more than a t-shirt. They're getting a piece of this company and a piece of that company's success. We also invested in a platform called Share Yourself, which connects people who are interested in doing projects in their community for local community development. Maybe it's painting a fence or putting up a small park or something, with people who have the know-how to help them do it. And so that's another fun one as well. All of this is like long-term investments in things that are not, we want these companies to succeed and give a return that's financial, but we're really looking at balancing that financial return with a social investment and a social return as well. So we understand that these are long-term investments. Many of them are really small interest rates for us, or we don't expect a huge return, but we do expect that they create some sustainability and some true economic engagement within our state and our membership.
Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting. I know here at Clearwater, we're starting to think about creating an affiliate nonprofit structure. And so I expect I will be having some conversations with you in future about how all this works.
Happy to talk about it. I mean, I want to say also, I want to kind of make the point that we also have looked at, our sponsorships, right? This is advertising, right? Our sponsorships and community development work, and our philanthropic work as real, true, sustainable investments, right? This is not just putting our name on something or doing this. We choose who we're sponsoring, why we're sponsoring with them, and really bring in these ideas of environmental and social sustainability into those choices which are made. So Melissa, yes, hang out, and everybody here, hang out with your marketing department, talk to them, figuring out how to bring this together, because the last thing that I think it's already been said many times, the last thing we want is for sustainability to be a side project. It can't be. It cannot be a side project.
Great. Yeah, thanks again. Well, thanks to all of our panelists. We're a little short on time, so I don't think we'll be able to do a general Q&A, but I hope that this did give you some ideas and some folks to reach out to if you want to pursue some of this more and get some more detail. Along those lines, I would like to close out with two very brief polls, which we will share the results of, and also in the hope of expanding this network of people interested in this kind of work. So the first poll question there is just, have you undertaken any sustainable investing activities? And just a quick yes or no, just to see how widespread this is. And Saeed, I don't know if we can throw those results up as they come in. That's good. That's a good mix. That's some expertise being developed and some people who are interested in looking at more, and that'll lead us into the second poll, which is what exactly is it that you have been looking into? Or at least it may not be possible to select multiple answers here. So maybe just take the most active, or you think of the most interesting thing that you're involved in. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all for your time and attendance. Like I said, we'll be being sure that everybody gets everyone's contact information here, and I'll speak with the organizers. I think it'd be great if we could actually share contact information for all the attendees as well, in the hopes that this really is the start of a conversation and not the end, right? Just some ideas and some contacts and some places to go from here. So thanks, Tom. Back to you.
Paul, that's a perfect segue. I know we're running a little late, but fantastic. I think a lot of what you guys touched on are really all about what we're trying to build here. Simeon, you're talking about some of the regulatory conversations. Tomorrow in day 2, we're going to have that bonus session about what this network can do. And it's one of the things we're really interested in is impacting our regulators, right? Giving our credit unions the ability to invest, in good, healthy financial products that are actually good products, right? And good for everybody. And Paul, as you mentioned, right? I think sharing information, sharing all the work you guys are doing, connecting people. Tomorrow we have fantastic events. We have a panel on green products. We have a consultant coming in. So again, I reposted the event link. Please encourage and have others join. Hope you all can join again tomorrow. But send this out to your credit union networks. I think we have another great day tomorrow, including where we take this community of credit unions who are working together to have a positive influence on our suppliers, on our ability to invest in our regulators and throughout, and really make sustainability, as you guys were talking about in the marketing side, make sustainability the authentic differentiator in the credit union space. It really is, right? Or making sure we have a group of an association that's not just about talking about our traditional things we talk about in our associations, but really kind of pushing forward on sustainability. So with that, on our closing remarks, I'm going to turn it over and welcome our the CEO of our co-sponsor, Carlos Calderon, Chief Executive Officer and President of the Organization American States, OAS FCU. OAS, Carlos, can you tell us about your thoughts for the day, what are your key takeaways, and what you're really excited about for tomorrow? So, Carlos.
Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, or even evening, depending on where you are connecting from today. We hope you have enjoyed this first day on our journey towards sustainability. As our first day of sessions ends, I can well imagine your heads are filled with ideas, with possibilities, with all of those what ifs and why don't we? It is a great feeling, isn't it? I was where you are right now just a year ago when I attended the second UN FCU Sustainability Summit in New York. What an eye-opener to learn about what others before you have been doing, realizing that many of the things that they were suggested, you are already striving for, and all of the new bits of information and ideas that you had not considered were there. And look at us now, helping UNFCU host the third Sustainability Summit already. Very exciting. Today was full of valuable and inspiring information. The day began with a warm welcome and encouraging words from Pamela, Agnone, Senior Executive Co-Sponsor of the Summit. Then Taylor Nelms, Senior Director, Philemon Institute, presented how diversity, equity, and inclusion contributes to organizational effectiveness. One main point he was driving was that diversity is not enough, that organizations have to adjust and evolve as well. Said 97% of the firms with over 1,000 employees are investing in DEI programs, which is encouraging. And he made us aware of the Philemon Institute Center for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, a new initiative to serve the credit union movement. Then we began to see how we can apply many of the concepts and strategies in our own facilities and operations with a world-class panel, Greening Your Facilities, Lessons Learned from the United Nations Community, moderated by Monica Kumar from the World Bank, with panelists from the most recognized and influential organizations in the world, the IMF, UNOPS, UNEP, and the National Geographic Society. That was followed by a very exciting network discussion, Your Sustainability Operational Challenges and Wins, which highlighted various practical strategies and recommendations on starting or strengthening your own sustainable program. The spotlight on new resources for your sustainability toolkit for self-assessment presented by Moramay, Navarro, the SDG Action Manager. This is an impact management solution available to all of us. We should take advantage of that. Then a panel discussion, Growing Credit Union Impact Through Sustainable Investments, moderated by Paul Herendeen from Clearwater FCU, with enlightening, practical, and achievable actions. This was an impressive panel with actual experience in the field. That has given us so much information, so much insight, that it was very, very exciting and encouraging. This has been a great day. The surveys conducted today show that participants today have a sustainability program show that 48% or all of us have some type of program in place, 52% vendor engagement. Then there was a question about green team. 61% responders said yes. Whether we have any investments in sustainable areas, 67% said yes. And the majority of the responders about what are the issues they're looking for or they're considering for sustainable programs, the majority responded green loans, about 50%. That shows that there is a lot going on in the movement, lots of ideas and programs in place. I hope that you have enjoyed starting on your green journey today. Before we reconvene for the evening, I would like to leave you with a little bit more insight into what you can do with today's information. It is a lot to take in, and it will be hard to shift through what you can and cannot do, but guess what? We all come from and are part of the credit union family. This means that we are not alone. Your presence here includes, by extension, your credit union's management team, the volunteers and staff, and the grassroots organizations that working at a credit union provides you. You have a large pool of potential helpers, enthusiastic individuals who already want to make this world a better place by just the virtue of being part of the credit union movement. You have started on your green journey by being here today. Take stock, an inventory of what you are doing already, what you have achieved, and what you are working on. And use this knowledge, these efforts, to encourage you to take it further. Get the sustainability snowball rolling. I would like to leave you with the following today. Credit unions are one of the largest grassroots movements in the world. As such, it is our duty towards our communities that we serve in society at large to serve as an example in embracing sustainability in all of our endeavors. Thank you for participating today, and I'll pass it back to Tom.
Dan, thank you, Carlos. Thank you, everyone who participated. We hope everyone comes back tomorrow. We have, again, as I mentioned, great sessions, great extra session. Please use our hashtag. If you know anyone who didn't attend, you think would, in the credit industry, who think would gain value, please send them the registration link. It's still open for day 2. Again, great panels tomorrow, green products, a roadmap with one of our sustainability consultants for those who really want to learn how to get along on the sustainability journey. So with that, I'll let everyone leave. Apologize for going a little long. We hope you got a lot of value. We hope you got a lot of value from today's session. So good afternoon, everyone. Enjoy your day. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you, Tom.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.